Thank you guys for joining me here for this interview. I'm really excited to have you guys here. I've been working with Adthrive for a while, you know that, and I'm really happy to use your technology on my sites. So why don't you go ahead and just do a short introduction to what Adthrive is for the listeners who don't know what it's all about.
Sure. So Adthrive is an ad management firm. And what we do is we work with the top publishers on the web, and we work with them to create an ad revenue strategy and earn the most that they can from their awesome content.
Thanks. So I've gathered some questions here from my audience, and I also have a few questions myself that I mix in between. So the first question here is from the audience, and they're asking about what type or what kind of articles do better with RPM on average. So RPM, obviously, we're talking about earnings per 1,000 page views.
Yeah, so there's several different factors that are really important to really any niche, and one of those is engaging content. So the longer readers on your page and they're interacting with your content, looking at your pictures and watching your videos and reading all your text, that person's going to be more and more valuable to you for several reasons. First of all, because the longer they're spending on your page, the more they might be encountering ads. Maybe they're scrolling down the page and they're seeing ads throughout your content. Also, in most cases, Adthrive ads refresh every 30 seconds, the ones that are in view. So if you're really engaged, they'll see some of those ad refreshes happen. And then also, the more a reader spends on your site with your content, I think the more likely they are to turn into a fan and probably be returning to your site as time goes on. So that's obviously a really valuable thing to have.
Totally.
Something else is the post layout itself. So just looking at where you're using text, where you're using photos. We found that if you have kind of photo after photo after photo, readers are just scrolling right through. They might miss the ads that are in between there. So text is really valuable to have because that reader's going to stop. They're going to read the text, and then the ads might be on the screen a little bit longer that way. And I think publishers generally know that we like having that white space when you're reading content on the web. That helps you kind of digest and maybe scan through the material a little bit faster, and it adds those opportunities for the ads to show up in between paragraphs. So that's one suggestion we have. And then looking at the ad layout itself. So one thing we do at Adthrive is we try to strike just the perfect balance between running enough ads so that it's worthwhile to you as a publisher, you've got revenue coming in, but also we don't want to overwhelm your readers, obviously. We don't want to scare them away because there's just so many ads that they can't get to the content and they don't even want to be on your site to begin with. So that's something that we're always evaluating. We're always trying to make sure we've got the best strategy for your ad layout. And we also take into account, the publisher's preferences. If they want to run a slightly more minimal ad layout, well, that's, obviously going to have an effect on their revenue that comes in versus a publisher that's like, let's, do a fully optimized layout. Let's do, all the opportunities that are there. Because we're not only looking at the number of ads, but also types of ads and the placement of ads. So some ads are more valuable to advertisers. For example, our sticky footer ad, because it's really viewable. It's there at the bottom of the site. It'll stick when the reader scrolls down. So that's one, for example, that advertisers find really valuable and like to see on a site. And then one other opportunity is video. So advertisers have lots of opportunities to advertise. They're looking for really high quality video content to put their ads on. So if publishers are not currently incorporating video into their content, it's a really great opportunity to kind of jump in there and see what kind of content they can create.
Yeah, I've seen some really great results with incorporating videos. Also, since I have a YouTube channel going along with my bigger site, so it just makes perfect sense to pick the little clips that people like the most, that has the best engagement on YouTube, and use them on the posts around the same topics.
Yeah, that's a great strategy for sure.
So another question here is kind of a follow-up question on the same thing. Do you have any data you can share on RPMs for different industries?
We don't share data kind of on a vertical by vertical basis. We use a lot of that internally to help us figure out where we should be focusing our attention for different publishers. I would say that there are certain verticals, home, food, technology, that will tend to have higher RPMs than others. And then there are some others that will probably tend to be lower, like entertainment or news. Some of those differentials are a function of the content layout and the user traffic and the audience in general. And some of those are just related to the advertisers themselves. I mean, advertisers are buying on different sites for different reasons. So I think if you're buying, technology is a great example. If you're on a computer review website, and you're looking to buy an expensive product, like computer advertisers want to be there and they want to pay more for that. So that's going to do better than somebody who's just reading, content about Kim Kardashian, which is fine and totally good content, but you're less likely to attract that other sort of advertiser. So I think it's a kind of mixture of those things defines which verticals are higher than others. Although so much of it is site specific, because we definitely see sites in kind of lower performing verticals beating sites in higher performing verticals all the time.
Okay.
Like that can certainly happen if you're optimized and really have a great site set up.
So is that due to time on site? Or what do you think would be a reason why some would just do better?
I think it is due to time on site is a piece of it. I think, site layout matters a lot, and it matters for a lot of the reasons Megan mentioned, but also advertisers themselves care about that. Like advertisers want their ads to be seen in really good user experiences. So sites that are set up nicely, that have nice layouts, that are attractive to users are places that advertisers are going to want to spend more money to. So it's definitely a combination of things that kind of play into that.
All right. Okay. Is there anything else you can share about good RPMs? Anything else? Or did we cover it?
I think, maybe the last thing to say is for us, at least, like, you should definitely, if you're an Adthrive customer, definitely email your team and say, help me optimize. And I think, our team has tons and tons of things they can look into to say like, hey, you should move this here. Or if you change the way this page worked, this could happen. You can also start looking at, in our tools, we have RPM by page by page. So you can start seeing which of my pages are doing really well and which ones are doing poorly, and say, what can I learn from the great pages to apply to the lesser pages? And how can I get more traffic to the better pages and things like that? So start thinking about things, not even just on at your macro site level, but really about the content itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And talking about that, because that's a pretty new feature that I really enjoy. I love spending time and seeing which articles are earning me more money. Do you have any roadmap or any plans for new features inside this little analytics part of things?
We have a very long roadmap. We actually have hired a number of people on our team to focus specifically on data.
Okay.
And they're doing a lot of research now to really understand what are the ways in which we can slice and dice data, integrate data from other sources, and figure out like the best way to push that information back to all of our publishers to help them make great decisions. So lots and lots being worked on, team being built up, definitely more plans to add more in there, and we're just kind of figuring out the details.
Okay, cool. Because I did see some new features popping up now and then. I think the last one was time on site, so you can also compare that with the other metrics. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Cool. So let's talk a bit about onboarding, because I had a lot of questions about this in my community. So could you start by just briefly sharing what are the main qualifications a site need to have beside the 100,000 page view threshold?
Yeah, for sure. And of course, everybody wants to be an ad driver, right? Everybody wants to come on board, and we want them too. So first of all, you mentioned the traffic requirement, which obviously is a big one, and it's easy to put out there and say, well, this is when you'll qualify. We also want that traffic to be consistent. So if there's a site that really hasn't been hitting 100,000 page views per month, but they had a viral post last month, that might be something we look at and say, let's make sure your traffic is going to consistently see this volume, and then we'll take you on. So that's one thing. And then the fact that US traffic is a lot more valuable to advertisers, and so we do look to see a majority of traffic coming from the US. Another factor is to not already be on a blocked site list with any of the major ad providers. Yeah. And then we look at the content. So our onboarding team will go individually on a personal basis to every site that applies, and they'll, click through the content, and they'll really kind of try to get a feel for what's this site about and what are they offering. So we look for original content, we look for high quality content, and content that's brand safe. So brand safety is kind of a buzzword, and it's basically saying, is this content that advertisers would be willing to display their ads next to? Is it family friendly? And along those lines.
And do you have any plans, or have you considered lowering that threshold from the 100,000 page views? I know for the second site and additional sites, you can get in quicker.
We have not. I mean, we've certainly talked and thought about it a lot, and we like our decision. We think it helps us focus on what we're great at, where we think we can add the most value to publishers. We're also able to get special deals from different advertising partners because of the fact that we work with larger sites and larger, more committed publishers. And not to say that there aren't great smaller publishers, like there are tons and tons of them, and we would love for them to work with us when they get to that level. But we think that kind of for our business and for where we think we can add the most value, like that's the right place to be.
Okay. Yeah. And do you favor sites around food, home, pet niches, and stuff like that? I see a lot of these sites now. I'm also inside the Facebook group, so I can obviously see what type of sites are using Adthrive. It seems like there's a lot of food bloggers, home bloggers, and pet niches and stuff like that. Could you think of, and also could you think of niches that you would never accept just around specific stuff?
I'll kind of answer in two parts.
Yeah, sure.
We don't favor sites in any vertical. We
Okay.
definitely have historically had more of a presence in food, home, parenting, those verticals that you mentioned. But I would say at this point, we actually, many other verticals are growing faster than those.
Okay.
So we definitely look to, like any publisher who's got great content, like we want to work with them and we want to figure that out.
Okay, cool. Good. That's good to hear. I also had somebody ask about, but you already touched on this. He's asking, is it impossible for a good Asian site to join Adthrive? So I think this guy, he has a pretty huge site, think about several 100,000 page views per month, but maybe like 60% traffic is from Asia. So there's still a good chunk from the US, but it's majorly, the majority of the traffic is not from the US.
I think, we are open to evaluating any site. We certainly have some sites that are more geographically dispersed, and we want to kind of look at all the criteria and figure out like what can we do. So much of our decision making, we have a lot of filters and checks around quality. We want to make sure we're working with great sites, but we also want to make sure that we can do the best job for a site. And if we are not confident that this is a site that we can help the most with, that's why we say, like, we're not saying we don't want sites with Asian traffic. We're saying we're not confident that we're the best at it. But if we look at a site and we say, oh, this site actually does have kind of the right ingredients that we think we can really help them, that's where we'll say yes. So I would say, like, it's always worth applying. It's always worth talking to our onboarding team and having the conversation.
Okay. Cool. And in case people do get rejected, what is the process there? Because I haven't had a site rejected myself. But I've heard some people, I wouldn't say complaining, but telling me that they didn't know what was wrong with the site and how to fix it and stuff like that.
We do share some information sometimes about why a site is rejected. Some things we keep confidential because there is a lot of, and again, this is not directed at your listener, but some, there's a lot of fraud out in the industry, and we want to make sure that we're working with sites that are really good and are, have really good traffic and have, and are brand safe, to Megan's point, and all those things. And we've learned this from our partnership with Google, where they release almost no information about when sites have issues because they don't want to give any tips to the outside world about like how they detect what problems could be.
Okay.
So we will give some information, but we hold a lot of things close to the vest because we don't want to share those confidential points, because it makes it easier for people who are trying to game the system to game the system.
That way around. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So yeah, let's talk a bit about this Chrome update that's coming up soon. And I know, Paul, you've been writing about this. I'm following your blog on Adthrive. That's pretty awesome. So could you tell us just a bit about what's going on with this Chrome update that everybody's talking about and this cookie thing first, and then maybe elaborate a bit about what Adthrive is preparing for this new future?
This is a great question. I spend a tremendous amount of time of my own on this very specific issue.
I could imagine.
I will talk and I'll try to keep it brief, but I may just ramble on, so cut me off.
I will.
So, even to step back a little bit, and think about the bigger industry here, there is so much of a push in the world for very good reasons to help users control their data, increase privacy, and reduce kind of like all these, bad things that are happening because user data is flying around the world. And some of that's about advertising, and some of that's about, people seeing, bad content on different social platforms. It's about misinformation. It's about all kinds of different problems that are out in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
The web browsers, Apple Safari, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, and Chrome are all trying to figure out ways that they can build more privacy into their browser. So for years, and in this case, Apple and Firefox have been really ahead of the game for a number of years, and really have removed a significant amount of the kind of non-private features that were available, mainly around cookies, from those browsers over the years. And at this point, those browsers are pretty well locked down, and third-party cookies don't work, and a lot of other things that advertisers have used in the past don't work at all anyway. Earlier this year, Google, who until then had really not done much, they said, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut down third-party cookies. We're going to make it so they don't work anymore. But unlike Apple and Firefox, we want to build a whole new set of technologies that are going to make it so advertisers can still advertise on the open web and still reach their audiences and still do great targeting and still measure their campaigns and all these things that advertisers really want to do. So that was like, kind of the big message that Google put out in the beginning of this year. We immediately kind of went into action and started working on a number of different paths. One of them is something we announced last week, actually, which is what we call Adthrive email identity, where we plug into the email capture forms on our publisher sites. So if you have a newsletter sign up or a login or some other place where your user is sharing an email, we can take that email, we hash it, which I will not get into the technical details, but basically turn it into an identifier that can never be reverse engineered back to an email. And we link it to a first-party cookie on that site. So now we know on that site that this user has this email. And that allows us to do a lot more targeting, do a lot more communication with advertisers to make it so they're way more likely to buy. So while we're losing the third-party cookies, we're gaining this linkage to email. So that's one thing that we've done.
Okay.
Another big thing that we're doing is working with Google on all these proposals that they're putting out there to try and improve advertising in the future. There are 25 separate proposals, there's probably more by now, called the Privacy Sandbox. And they are talking about those proposals in the World Wide Web Consortium, which is the industry trade group that governs the entire web. It's run by Tim Berners-Lee, who's the guy that created the web back in the 90s. It is really this like huge organization that manages like HTML and CSS and all these standards that any web developer would know.
Okay.
And also now is working with Google on building and setting these new standards. So we are heavily engaged in that process and working with Google, working with other browsers, working with very large publishers who are involved, working with ad technology companies, working with advertisers to make sure that those standards are built in a way that work for publishers, but specifically in our case, work for kind of mid-sized publishers that Adthrive really specializes in working with. So we're really there at the front of that. We were on calls last week. We had 8 hours of calls on a whole bunch of different topics, and the only publishers on the call were Hearst, Axel Springer, which is a really large European publisher.
Yeah. I know them.
Maybe News Corp was there, New York Times, Washington Post, and us. And we are making sure that Adthrive publishers have a seat at the table and are really part of those conversations. And as those standards happen, they will happen in ways that we can't control ultimately, because Google and the W3C will make those decisions, but we're a big part of making sure that they work for our publishers. So that's a really big thing. We have a new person start last week who worked previously at Firefox and really knows the insides of how browsers work, and really is able to work with these browser engineers and work with these privacy experts to say, hey, here's a way to do it that preserves privacy and makes it so users get what they need, but also makes it so it works for advertisers, and it works in this case for Adthrive sites too.
And so, what do you think will happen? Do you think that the ad earnings will drop for a while and maybe bounce back, or what do you think? I know it's impossible to foresee the future, but
it's pretty far away still. I mean, this isn't scheduled to happen until early 2022, so we have time. It's also possible it gets delayed. It's also, all of this is all very entangled with, there are now multiple antitrust suits against Google around the world. And those antitrust suits play into this as well and may stop Google. There are privacy regulations coming into play that may have effect on this. So none of this is certainly happening, and that time frame isn't certain. So to some level, like, there's time, which is good.
Okay. I actually thought it was 2021, but
nope. You got 15 months at least, and probably more.
Okay.
Yeah. We're also working Our new hire from Firefox actually is working with a few ad tech companies now on building out a way to do some testing and experimentation to see what the impact could be. Because to some level, if Google and the rest of us do our jobs right, we can build new technologies to replace third-party cookies and make it work in a more privacy-proof way. Like that's the goal here. Like, how do we get to that place and make sure that happens? Because if that happens, like, that's a huge win, and that's what we're trying to work towards.
Yeah. What I feel like people will still keep spending more money on digital advertising and moving money from offline to digital ad spend. So, and I feel like we will still have our websites, right? So to me, it just feels like the losers here might be the companies advertising, because, you know, they'll probably have a little less tracking and maybe not be targeting as much. But I feel like, I mean, if you take your cut, we take our cut, and the budget is still there, I don't really see why we as publishers should fear this as much as I hear people freaking out about this. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, you know, you kind of said it before. I think so much of it's uncertainty. Like, we don't know. Like, it could be fine. It could be not fine. It could actually be better than fine. Like, there are scenarios that we've looked at where we're like, wow, like, Adthrive publishers could gain here. And I think that the fear comes from the fact that we don't know, none of us know yet what the answer is, and what it's going to look like. So I think as we get closer, we'll get more insight. And I think that's good. But I think that the main thing we can do now is really make sure that we are, you know, working to push forward on proposals and new standards that can actually make this work. And like, that's the critical point.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I'm excited to follow your thoughts on the blog on Adthrive and so on. Great. Okay. So shifting gears a little bit here, can you tell us a bit about your premium program, the requirements, and maybe explain to people what it is? I know a couple of people who are inside this premium program, and how it differs from the standard Adthrive setup.
Yeah, so that is what we call Adthrive Account Management, and it's something we launched last year. And basically what it does is it pairs our high volume publishers with a dedicated support person, their account manager, so that when they need support from Adthrive, they're pretty much always going to the same person. And then that individual obviously has access to all of our various teams and will maybe gather up, you know, the resources or the answers that they need to help out their publisher, and they'll be, you know, the voice that gets back to them. So that's really useful. And then being part of that program also opens up some opportunities, such as some early testing access. Sometimes when we want to implement something new, but we want to test it out first, we'll offer it to the publishers that are in that program and let them see what they think about it. So the requirements for that are 750,000 monthly sessions through Google Analytics, and then also 10 million monthly ad impressions over a 6-month average. So those are numbers we're always crunching and always kind of taking a look at. We try to do our best to proactively reach out to publishers that have qualified to move up into the account management program and get an assigned account manager. But we also have, there's some information in our help center for any publishers that think that they've reached that point. It's just a simple form they can fill out to communicate with us, and we can take a look.
So I have a question also here from the community about your algorithms. So one guy asked, how often does Adthrive change its algorithms? Again, I don't know exactly what he means here, but I guess you can interpret it any way you want.
I'll do the best I can to answer that question. And I'll answer it from a slightly different angle. We have a really big engineering team working on our ad code alone. We have about 15 people working literally just on our advertising systems, which is the algorithms and integration of partners and direct integrations with advertisers and things like that. So they're doing a lot. I would say at this point, we're deploying new code every day and changing the way things work. We've also built a really sophisticated experimentation system. So as we make changes, we're not just pushing code out into the world and hoping for the best. We run experiments. So we can see, okay, we're going to run this new code on 3% of the entire Adthrive network and see how it performs versus everything else. And then we can see, this change is actually up, 0.7%. Like, that's great. Let's roll it out everywhere. This change is down, -1% or -0.1%. Let's pull this one back and do more testing on it, maybe modify the code, see what's wrong here, and then push it back out to test. That way we can test lots and lots and lots of little changes and see which ones are positive, which ones are negative, which ones are performing the way we want, and make sure that those are always positive changes for publishers. So we're typically running, 8 to 10 of those experiments at any given time and trying to figure out like which code is working better and really pushing forward and every single day rolling out new code that's improving the way things operate.
Okay, cool. Another question here. What do you do differently than AdSense? I think a lot of people don't know exactly what the difference is between like you guys with the premium ad network and just using the basic AdSense setup.
That's true. And occasionally we also get support questions from publishers using AdSense who think that we are AdSense.
Yeah.
But we're not. Similar name, but we're not. So there's a couple of really major things that are different. And we do, if a publisher comes to us and they don't meet our requirements, we might suggest starting with AdSense as a way to just get ads up on their site and kind of get started with it and to kind of develop their domain's relationship with advertisers. So they have kind of some history there. But some of the major differences are, so both companies use programmatic advertising, which is just the automated buying and selling of ads. But we have services well beyond that. So we have a dedicated sales team that's going out there with advertisers and they're negotiating really premium direct deals just for Adthrive publishers. So whereas with AdSense, you're just relying on that programmatic buying and only through Google, we work with several of the top ad exchanges in addition to those premium direct deals. So definitely get a lot more with Adthrive. And
so you can say you sort of get a bigger ad inventory when you use you guys, because you're not only hooked into Google Ad Exchange. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And advertisers know Adthrive as a brand and as a portfolio of sites that have been vetted that are high quality. So when you sign on with Adthrive, it's almost like a stamp of approval with advertisers saying this is a good site. So we're willing to spend more money on these ads. So, and then the other thing is, and anybody that's had AdSense probably knows this, there's basically zero support. There's not a team you can reach out to and say.
I get so many questions in my community about AdSense. And sorry guys, I'm not using AdSense.
Yeah, and AdSense won't help them out either. From a technical standpoint, if something goes wrong, there's not like a team there ready to help you with it, but also they're not going to say, this is where you should put the ads. You can go into AdSense, you can generate your ad code and put it onto your site, but who's to say, unless you're doing some really serious testing and you really know what you're talking about, who's to say if that's the right place for it? Whereas at Adthrive, you have a whole team behind you helping you to make sure that your ad layout is perfectly optimized, that your ad locations are in the right place, and that you're running these highly viewable ad types so that you don't have to worry about it. That's really kind of our thing, is that we'll make sure that everything's set. And if you're the kind of publisher that just wants to be like, I put my trust in Adthrive, go to town, guys, do it. Like, we'll do it. And we'll make sure that it's, the best that we think that your site can perform. And publishers that want to have a little bit more of a back and forth, like, we're totally open to that too.
Yeah, it's worth also adding to what Megan said about kind of us working with advertisers directly and lots of other ad exchanges beyond just Google. Advertisers are looking for, most of them are big companies of their own. They want to work kind of with big companies and make sure that their ads are going to really good places where they can understand what it is and where it is. And a big thing that helps us is the size of Adthrive in aggregate. We are, so ComScore is a company similar, like Nielsen measures TV shows and how many people watch them. ComScore measures the web and measures how many people go to websites. With Adthrive, we're able to aggregate together all of our sites into a single property, it's called. And with that, Adthrive is the 12th largest in the US and probably in the world at this point. So, we're as big as Hearst, which runs dozens of magazines and newspapers and TV stations. We're bigger than USA Today. We're bigger than Wikipedia. We're bigger than Walmart. We're bigger than Pinterest. We're bigger than all these huge companies. We're nearly the same size as Disney, which includes ABC and ESPN and all these different things that Disney owns, like this massive company. So advertisers see that and they go, oh, like this is really, not only is it high quality and great sites, but they're also really big in aggregate too. And that really helps a lot. Whereas Google AdSense, like Google isn't selling AdSense. They're just plugging into these automated systems and kind of seeing what comes out the other end.
I have a couple other things that I wanted to throw out there. some special perks that we offer to Adthrivers, which is we partner with some top SEO experts and email marketing experts. And those are areas that we want to, offer some extra guidance to our publishers, because we know that that'll, eventually help grow their revenue. So that's something that we provide. And then also we guarantee our publisher payments. So what you see in your dashboard is always what we're going to pay out to you, even if an advertiser or someone along the payment chain doesn't follow through. We're never going to let that affect our publishers. We're going to take that out of our own cut.
Yeah, AdSense will do clawbacks where at the end of where you thought you made $200, and at the end of the month they're like, "Oh, just kidding, you made 160." And that's the end of it. Like we never do that.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool. And talking about, no, not exactly talking about, but if we could talk a bit about ad rates in general, like if I how to phrase this, like how much money do people, if you combine all the sites together, do you see ad rates going up? Or do you see people earning more and more from ads?
Generally, yes. This year has been odd. So when COVID happened, numbers definitely were not going in the right direction. From the middle of March through kind of June, it was not, it was a very different time than anyone's ever seen before. And then from June onwards, things started kind of ticking back in a better direction. And then I would say, the summer was okay. And then September really, really got into great shape and really started, doing what we like to see. October's been very strong so far. We are optimistic for the rest of this year, but again, there's so much uncertainty in the world today and advertisers are naturally skittish. So if bad things happen, like it could go in the wrong direction, but right now let's all cross our fingers.
And if we take this year out of the equation and not thinking about like pre-pandemic, how did you see the year-on-year development? Like if we take several years back?
We have seen, ad rates and publisher revenue grow, every single month for I have data back for 6 years now. And again, excluding, pandemic times, like every single month was higher than last. There is always, dips at the beginning of new quarters. So at the beginning of July, which is the beginning of the third quarter, the beginning of October, and then particularly at the beginning of the year, advertisers take time to reset their campaigns and change their ad creatives and things like that, which slows things down. So you'll see a couple of weeks of kind of slowness at the beginning of a quarter. But historically, the rates have just always.
Yeah, it seems like Black Friday always hits a new high every year, right?
November 15th through Christmas are good times for everyone.
Yeah, definitely.
And just a quick plug for the Adthrive blog. Every other Friday, we publish a post with industry trends, and it's not just for Adthrive publishers. It's really useful information for any publishers out there. And a lot of times we have unique resources that they can find there. And we talk about, where ad spending is going and the trends we're seeing. So that's a really good resource to look at. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, totally check that out. I can leave a link to it in the description of this video when it goes live. I also want to ask you if you do have any plans for an affiliate program in the future. I know some of the other premium networks, they have an affiliate program, and I believe you never had an affiliate program, or am I wrong?
We don't have one. We pretty much just always want prospective publishers to trust the reviews they're reading. Not that we expect that anybody would, say things that weren't true, but we just want them to know that these reviews, anything that positive they're hearing about Adthrive, they're unincentivized. That's what people really are experiencing. They're really, truly happy with us. But we have been known to send special surprises when a new publisher does let us know who refers them. So I guess you could say we have kind of an undercover, not quite an affiliate program, but a thank you program.
Okay, interesting. Okay, that was actually all the questions. Is there anything else you feel like we should talk about? Anything you want to share?
I think you hit a lot of the high points. These are great topics, and these are certainly the things that we're talking about and focused on. So hopefully this is helpful to all your viewers.
So thank you guys so much for joining me here, and yeah, have a great night. Well, here it's already evening. I guess it's daytime where you are, right? I'm in Denmark, so. Yeah, the sun went down like 4 hours ago because it's winter now. Yeah. So yeah, take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.